Thank you for that, Birgitta. So, speakers, what do you think about today's topics?
I say, first of all, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting. And
I loved every presentation.
Yes, I'm sorry I forgot to mention you, Giorgio, because I really enjoyed your presentation too. But you were the first one, so
you didn't have to.
no, but it was really a good beginning. So it was to set the tone.
Maybe Svandís, what do you think? Do you have any questions for us?
Well, I've already received some questions.
Oh, okay.
From online, so.
All right.
Would you like to get one? It's for Giorgio. Could you help us to translate works of John McCurdy into Ukrainian? We need your help in order to deal with rights on translations and publications.
Well, I studied a little Russian when I was young, but I don't think it would be ideal for me to help with the actual translation of body maps and explaining some key concepts. But yes, of course, I'll be available. I have assisted with the translations into Spanish and Italian of the cancer stage of capitalism. So I could certainly help out vis-a-vis the Ukrainian translation. I don't think that there should be any big issue as regards any rights. McMurtry himself, as the author of the book, retains them, and so his material can be freely translated into foreign languages.
Right, and there is somebody here wanting to get Vala Ragnarsdóttir slides for her talk. Is that possible?
Yeah, my slides are always available, so I can give them to Cliff and he can upload them or send them or whatever is best to do.
Great. And we have a question here for everyone, I think. How do we move towards a circular economy model if the rules are only made for the free market model?
It's not enough just to take the take some stuff and recycle it and then continue as before. It will reduce a little bit what we need from the mountains in terms of resources, but we need to link the circular economy with other economic models, like the one that I mentioned there, the biophysical circular economy for well-being. That's an effort to integrate the well-being of nature and people into the circular model.
I could add one thing, because I was listening with keen interest to Birgitta, who was describing her own experience as a parliamentarian. And when we talk of civil commons, parliaments, as well as universities, such as those in which Vala and I work, can function as civil commons, insofar as they serve the public good. They don't always do it, of course, but they can, and often they've done it. And these are just two of the many tools that we have at our disposal. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. As I said, there are trade unions, there are NGOs, there are consumer associations. There is a whole network of legal bodies and legal instruments that can and must be utilized and have already been utilized, because under certain respects we have made some progress, but not enough, because as Vala clearly depicted for us, the current economic trends are life destructive on the grandest scale imaginable. But yeah, we don't have to do anything particularly innovative. We have to use the tools that are at our disposal and push them all into one direction.
Can I say something to this? I've actually been studying how the neoliberal economic model was sort of instigated. And it originated in a meeting in a village called Pellerin in Switzerland in 1947, where 36 men came together. They were economists, historians, and philosophers. And they came up with this market economy model. And then after that, the American Chamber of Commerce commissioned a report from a guy called Powell, the Powell Memorandum for the Chamber of Commerce of the United States in 1972, where he basically laid out how they were going to achieve this model. They were going to take over the economics department and support professors being hired in who were had a neoliberal inkling. They were going to write all the textbooks, but should be used in all economics and business schools in the United States and elsewhere. And they are still being taught. I go and check every once in a while in my bookstore here at the University of Iceland. It's still the primary text. And this is what so here's where we need to be more clever. This is why I named this project 36 times 36 in training young women and new economic thinking. Because what we aim to do is to train 36, and then they go back to their communities, and we will have people from all over the world, and they will replicate the training they got from us in Argentina, in Spain, in China, in India, and in Africa, and in Europe, and so on. 36 times 36 is 1,296. And then it's, it will be replicated some more. Then we need to sit down and write the textbooks, and we need to make sure that they're actually taught in the different universities. And we can use social media, but we need to be more clever than the neoliberals, and they also took over being advisors to presidents like Reagan, like Margaret Thatcher, like Angela Merkel, and China even bought this philosophy. So, but now we need a new philosophy, because if we don't, then we're screwed. That's it. So, and there's a big call for women to be more involved. And I remember Birgitta saying to me when she was still in politics, that there were so few women who showed the finance committee of the in Parliament any interest. And that's why she wanted to be there, to have a different voice. So, and there's a call for more women in economic, in business and economics all over the world. One report and paper after another, showing that having female voices in there actually does make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I noticed that, when I was doing international work, I have never been a big fan of NATO, for example, but I thought it would be very interesting to understand how it works, because I cannot suggest any change to anything unless I understand how it works in the first place. Like, Vala was, talking about the 36. If she didn't know about it, she couldn't come up with a more clever solution to dismantle it. And so I noticed that in NATO, like in all these sort of parliamentary things, you have a mirror of how parliaments are supposed to work, like in the international work. And in NATO, you had all these different committees. You had the humanitarian committees, and then you had the economic committee, and you had, hybrid war committees or whatnot. And all the women went into the humanitarian stuff, whereas I was the only one sitting and listening into the economic committee, because I felt, and I was the only woman often. It was unbelievable, because women had been told that it's too complex for us. It's a man's domain, which is kind of crazy. But hopefully that that is going to change. And the same applies with if you want to change and fight for the climate and Earth. Why in the world would you select to be in the environmental committee? You should go into the industry committee, because that's where you get the changes needed. And so we have to reprogram ourselves and get people inside these different spaces that have never been occupied with people that think like us.
Yes, are you ready for more questions? Here's one from Canon. All these ideas are of course very promising. When people try to implement them, they come across many real-world hurdles. Unsurprisingly, how can we create a forum where such pioneers can come together and figure out how to tackle those hurdles by learning from each other and brainstorming?
Well, this is one forum, but we need these discussions to be happening everywhere. And this is what I discuss with my students every year. Then they go out and do their own thing. We just need to replicate what we have learned and hold discussions with our friends and families. 2 years ago, I decided that I needed to have discussions in my living room, sort of like the salons were in the Enlightenment period. And I invited whoever on Facebook, anybody who was interested to come and discuss. And they drove all the way to Mosfellsbær, which is like 17 kilometers outside of Reykjavik, to have these discussions. And they actually continued until COVID. Then it wasn't really possible for us to meet. But I aim now that I live in the center of Reykjavik to continue this. And we read, several books together and bounced, ideas back and forth. We need a lot of those. So if you're in a book club, find a good book to read, not only a novel. Read Naomi Klein or Eisenstein or whoever is actually, writing about change.
Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I would like to add. Basically, I feel like, again, it just reminds me of like what I mentioned a little bit is also that the conversation, the intellect, the informing, the blueprints are necessary, but then what often I feel also lacks is the practice. And so, like, for example, I mentioned like a community center in Iceland or wherever in the world, and you have basically this environment of whatever people coming in to meet others, dancing or doing yoga or whatever martial arts. What's really important is also that what is this community based off of, on what kind of values. And especially if you want to make this an open community center that other people can get into, what you're trying to do is that I think in order to get to this promising level is, again, it's just more of the inclusion and trying to basically practice these values rather than just talking about them all the time. And I think through that, through these actions, I think some of these things that we're talking about are going to seem a lot more realistic. To share an experience, actually, and I think it still relates to the question, is like when I was living in Sweden last year, and I was meeting actually with a community center by the name of Noden, which was founded by people that had been involved with the Burning Man community. And they had basically I'd never been really much involved with Burning Man or knew much about them, but it was very fascinating to see what they basically, even though they don't really have, at least from what I've learned, too much of a direction, like they're not trying to really spread an idea or try to get somewhere like appeasing politics or whatever, but they do live a lifestyle, a lot of them, where they meet in this community, and they really put to practice and things I've tried to kind of smear and remind the Zeitgeist movement, things like leave no trace behind, or basically learning, to not to find the commonalities more than the differences and whatnot. And I think the more that we as a society do that, and I think Reykjavik or Iceland has one of the biggest chances of doing this, maybe Faroese Islands if you want to get competitive in a humorous sense, but I think this is really, really possible, and we're very close to doing this, to actually making it look more hopeful and a lot more realistic, rather than things coming out of talks or lectures on how we can basically sustain better well-being.
Can I add one comment, because I think that Cliff is correct as regards the importance of social experiments. Voluntary communities have been, I guess, as old, at least as Christianity when it comes to Europe. The first monasteries were an example of voluntary communities. And in fact, they also practiced early forms of communism, if you like. I think also that the carbon footprint was pretty low. And you need examples that people can witness and think about, and you need ideas that lead people into having life-changing insights. And you need them all the time, everywhere and endlessly. We will never have one forum that reaches everyone. We will never have one example that will convince everyone. The Soviet Union didn't work in that respect, for example, or the Paris Commune either. We've had, or the Christian monasteries, to go back to my early example. So as I think the lifelong commitment of at least three speakers here to politics and activism exemplifies, we just have to reach as many fora as possible, to promote as many social experiments as possible, and try to convince and change the lives of as many people as possible. If enough millions of people do it on Earth, then there will be hope.
Yes, exactly. I was just thinking about little drops of water. So, one little tiny drop might not change a lot, but when the real shift is when we inspire by our actions others to try out, and it's okay if we do some experimentation, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you have to give up. I don't know how many mistakes I've made, and it's not mistakes because I have chosen to learn from it. I've tried so many different things. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I know that nothing is as important as, taking ownership and responsibility for how we feel and how we relate to others. We are nothing without the relationship with other peoples. And so if we preach some kindness and shift to others and do not implement it ourselves in our own lives, then it's never going to work. But we can always change. It's okay. We can always change what we're trying and see if it doesn't feel right. Like Giorgio said, there is not one way. There are many ways. That's the beauty of it.
There's another question here for Cliff, I think. A lot of great resources being mentioned here. Can a one-pager of links be shared with everyone, please?
So I'm assuming that's referring to Koto, and yes, of course. They will be shared also on the Zeitgeist Movement Iceland, and also the TZM Global page, all contact information as well, how to get a hold of all of us, and as well as Koto. For the new thing, it's still in the groundworks and ideas, and trying to meet with people to make it work. So you'll have to just keep keep an eye, or keep how do you say again, just I don't know, just keep on the lookout for it, basically, for when we have something a little more established. It's Yeah, but Koto would be the one I think to pay attention to the most, because they are over there in Finland on the rise of actually making something happen. So I highly recommend looking at their YouTube channel, their website, and that will all be listed a little bit later after the meeting has passed.
Can I ask you something, Cliff?
Yeah.
You know, in my sustainable futures class, and I discuss these intentional communities with my students, and you know, and they are many and based on, you know, different principles. But how is Koto different from, for example, the eco-village movement, which is actually quite a lot of communities around the world based on their training and ideas?
To give you an honest answer, of course, is that I do not know much about them, to be honest.
Okay.
I can only say this, that I don't know what can be so much different, except for what I've noticed in my personal experience when I've visited communities and whatnot. And I've also in my life, I've seen quite a few, and that one of the commonality problems that they had is, again, that it just went into looking into, again, just lots of things like infighting, not being able to take care of the social environment, and things getting a little bit too toxic, especially when it's a very small group of people that gets very intimate after a while. And that's also a cause of being too isolated, spending less time with people outside of the group rather than so. And I think,
Yeah,
what's
I've
that?
actually attended a global eco-village network meeting where I discussed these issues, and they actually have formulated methodologies to solve conflicts. But they do actually say, or one of them said to me, actually one of the most tiring part of being a member of my eco-village, I think it was in Austria, is all the endless meetings where we have to find a compromise and make a decision. So,
and
it is possible, but it takes time.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, is that with people in Koto over in Finland, they're being very realistic about it, I think. And I mean, basically, there's no big expectations that Koto within its first few months or a year is going to be extremely successful, but it's going to need definitely a lot of feedback from them, or maybe from one of these other eco cities or communities that, I mean, yeah, communities that you are mentioning. And that for people from Koto and Finland right now listening, I hope they're taking input on this, because that's the point, is maybe also there's an advantage of this, that Koto might not know about these other organizations, because if they try and do something first and seeing where structure is basically not working in the environment, and then they look towards the others, that might be a good idea to exchange information, for example, on how to improve, maybe on both ends. So that basically, yeah, it's also in the end it's also the environment of being able to produce again some kind of an output as a service for others outside of Koto, but as well as they want to really expand as well and use the technology at bay, and not necessarily strive as far, maybe at short term, like maybe the Venus project might want to try and do, but just try to really, yeah, make it definitely that technology definitely is able to be of a great functionality in this. So that would perhaps, as Mike just said, would be the difference.
I have a question for Birgitta. Birgitta, do you think Julian is now controlled by the CIA as a pawn, as some skeptics say? Question by Pro Solis.
No, absolutely not. And yeah, just no. I heard so many different theories. He's controlled by Russia, CIA, blah, blah, blah. He's just controlled by himself. You know, he's a very egotistical person. So I don't think he's controlled by any clandestine organization.
And then we have here to the speakers, especially Clifford. What do you all think about permaculture? Can you speak on that? From Alkjört.
I can do that.
Yeah, you go first, Vala.
I have a permaculture design certificate from a course I took in Norway because I was interested to learn about it. I had heard about it for many years, but had the opportunity to attend the course and then brought the same teacher to Iceland to teach. I think permaculture is great because it's based on ecological principles. It's all about to use and learn from the local ecosystems and conserve water and conserve energy and grow as much as you can in your own balcony or back garden and etc. And what I particularly like about the permaculture movement, which actually comes from Australia, is that it has three basic values. It is care for nature, care for people, and share the proceeds or share the profits. What could be better, you know? If we all lived according to that, we wouldn't be in the trouble we have now.
Yeah, and I can also jump in and say that definitely this is of interest to people working in Koto. And I also have an interest in it. I don't have the background or certificate as Vala does, but I definitely see it as something that should be applied and looked into a lot more. So
there are permaculture teachers in Finland, so you know it should be easy for the people in Finland to attend.
Yeah, like that's the thing, is that I don't know. I'm involved with my involvement, just so everyone knows, that with Koto has been limited, because I mean I've been just included in chats. I mean I know the people from you know, there are also people involved in the Zeitgeist movement, so I've met them, I know them personally, and that was another reason why I wanted to get involved with Koto, because I thought this is cool. But there's many types of chats, and there's different things concentrated in how to make Koto possible. It's not just one feed. So there are perhaps conversations about premature culture or whatnot that's happened that I do not know about. So again, I encourage everyone looking into the links that I will post later, and also asking them and engaging in discussion. And I'm sure it will be very much appreciated. And on my behalf, if you want to talk about it with me another time.
Here's a question from Justin Megatron. Will the UBI be a possible transition over to the Venus Project, or another better studied societal structure?
I'll jump in for that. I'm not a spokesperson for the Venus Project, but I feel like that's kind of, at least from other people that I know from the Venus Project, that's kind of a split answer. I mean, we're not necessarily, like in the Zeitgeist movement, people were actually firstly promoting the works of Jacques Fresco and the Venus Project in the early days, and some still do and some don't. And then there are people that, again, they're very split on this subject, where the UBI, or a universal basic income, is really a stepping stone towards to getting to what they would call a resource-based economy, or otherwise post-scarcity society, if you want to put our economy. So it's a little bit split, I think, how to get there. And I think somebody from the Venus Project should really answer it. But I mean, anyone here that is familiar with Jacques Fresco, I don't know what where they make their mind on that to make it possible.
Can I step in here? So I've looked a little bit into the universal basic income aspect of a new economy. And actually, what it looks to me is that the experiments that have been done, they're all positive. And they range from being done in Finland, in the UK, in Canada, all over Africa, etc. And basically, you know, there was one article in one of the British newspapers, I can't remember which one, or maybe it was even in The Economist, that said, that the reason why, that the best way to hand money to the poor is to actually give it to them. and that was after they did an experiment with, I think, 14 homeless people in one of the cities of the UK. After a year, 9 of them actually had found a place to live. None of them had spent all the money that they were given, and they didn't spend it all on drugs and alcohol. They spent all the money on bettering themselves. There's an experiment from the 80s in Canada, where one village, raised everybody's income, which was like 30% of the people in that village were under the poverty limits. They raised everybody's incomes to the poverty limits. And then this data was not analyzed until 30 years later. And actually the outcome was not only better for the people who received this and the families who received it, but also the next generation, Kids stayed longer in school. Girls had children later. Those who had children, they spent some time home with them. They had better education, etc., etc. So I think it is a one step into having a regenerative economy, but it's not the only step.
I think that in regard to this, I think actually the study on the homeless people was in Canada as well, and they selected specifically people that were not dealing with severe mental illness and drug addiction.
That may be another study. This one was definitely, I'm referring to, was in the UK.
Okay, because it just heard on the BBC last week, an episode. Anyway, in regard to the reason why I am interested in universal basic income is not necessarily because of stepping stone into a different economic model. The reason why I just think it's so important is because I have seen so many people fall between the cracks in the welfare system, or people that want to get education, they can't get education because they haven't finished Danish or something, so they can't get further education. People that need support because they get sick and so forth are not getting the support. So there are so many cracks, and the system seems to be created to make people, feel like they are less than human. It's like a system of it's like a system of dehumanization. And there are so many people that are experiencing this, and it's so expensive to run the system in order to get like a minimum payment. And you're punished if you get a little bit of work. You're punished, and you are like put into a situation where you're stuck generation after generation. You're stuck in a poverty trap, instead of we foster the ability for people to just thrive and follow the flow of life. And so if we could just eliminate the unemployment office, the disability office, the pension office, and just have a flat no strings attached to begin with these groups of people. We're having so many people unemployed because of COVID. We should immediately eliminate all these offices that are sort of like trying to figure out a way to shave off some, cents from people that are already having below poverty payments. So that's why I like basic income.
May I add some thoughts as regards universal basic income, which I think can solve many issues vis-a-vis welfare provision, as Birgitta is saying. I have relatives living in the United Kingdom, in Scotland specifically, and some of them have gone through all kinds of ritual, institutional humiliations in order to be able to claim the resources that they need in order to survive. So we're talking about life goods, a la McMurtry. The UBI has an interesting history because it's an idea that in the current form originates from the right of the political spectrum rather than the left. Richard Nixon proposed it, for example, in the United States in the 1960s, although the most successful experiments were performed by left-wing governments. And I'm thinking of Mincom in Canada in the 1970s and the Bolsa Família under Lula in Brazil. So it has the potential to bring growth where growth is needed in terms of actual life enablement, because growth is not necessarily bad. By using apt value theory, there can be good growth and bad growth. Bad growth is growth where we don't need it anymore and where it just destroys and consumes human beings, their free time, their mental well-being, and their environment. But there is also good growth where it means finally getting rid of utter poverty, ignorance, and the inability to access those institutions and opportunities that allow for personal well-being and self-realization, such as higher education, for instance.
If I may just add something in just really quickly, if before we move on, is that I also think, yeah, just that universal basic income, I also don't really see it as kind of necessarily a stepping stone towards what we might want to call a monetaryless or post-scarcity economy or whatnot. But in my personal view, I think a universal basic income might also help enable is just as kind of just mentioned, is that it will also perhaps help people come to another conclusion that not necessarily directly, and it would be something that perhaps would take time. I think that UBI, though, will eventually lead to the axis of basic necessity becoming a bigger understanding. So if you're basically you're getting coverage to, you have an unconditional right to have a house or to have water or to have food. I think this kind of stuff, which I've heard talked about, so universal basic necessity, if I remember correctly, I heard it in a university in Austria being spoke about for the first time years ago. But I feel like that UBI can slowly grow into that people are no longer just dependent off of even just from a basic income, but that some things will eventually just become a human right to people. And I feel like this would also be something leading into a much greater connection and way into a post-scarcity economy, I think.
Cliff, may I mention the fact that having a roof over your head, not one that you own necessarily, but one that protects you from the elements, having enough food, having enough water, having primary education, and having healthcare when ill, however provided that may be, are already human rights.
Yeah,
and it's the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights that is as old as 1966 in its passing at the United Nations, and then came into entry in the 1970s. I can't recall the exact year, but it was in the 1970s. So these are already human rights. They are not a charity that the state provides and that can withhold at will. These are rights of the individual, at least in all those countries that have signed and ratified the covenant.
Yeah, and then and I understand that, and again, it just makes me think just how contradicting this entire dominance level of society that we're all in, basically, that it's not that these human rights are not being they are not being implemented or recognized, basically. Mm-hmm. So that's what I hope, is that maybe UBI might help people come closer to having a better understanding of them.
Yes, ready for the next one? Justin Megatron also asked, how and why do the people in governmental positions avoid on a ground level criminal activities, as in they can decide to send people to war to push the war machine as and when they please? My personal views are in line with Jack Fresco.
Anyone else here also familiar with Jack Fresco, the founder and architect of the Venus Project? He passed away a few years ago at 101.
No,
Yeah, I know his work.
really say very much about him. No.
Yeah.
But the war machine is actually, ruling things behind the scenes, and that becomes very visible when nations like the United States go regularly into all sorts of unnecessary wars, and like in the Balkans and in the Far East, because they need to use up the weapons so that the weapons factories can continue working. This, however, is not very, very visible. But this is something that we really need to discuss. Compare, for example, how much money, I wrote this in some paper a few years ago. I compared how much money was supposed to go into the Green Sustainability Fund for the Sustainable Development Goals to the international war budget, and it was much lower. So we have the money, it's just not being spent in the right places.
Money has never been a problem insofar as states can create it at will. Now, under the present conditions, even private banks can create it at will. So it's the control over money that is of crucial importance. And that leads back into part of what Cliff was saying regarding the financial side of grassroots movements. And Einar, in particular, in his utopia of moneyless reality, perhaps we don't need to do away with money, but with the origin of money, rather than being some higher authority that imposes it onto people. It can be a grassroots creation. There are such social experiments going on online these days. It's not just Bitcoin, there is Equacoin, for example, going on, whereby the participants decide which projects to fund in a democratic way. And each participant receives a kind of basic income that can be spent on the economic activities that orbit around this virtual coin. So that is perhaps one way to redistribute economic power.
It's like what we were talking about the other day when we were chatting, that, that a dead tree is worth more than a living tree. And I think that applies on all fields and what this system has to say to all living beings, including us people. So therefore, that's kind of my opinion about it in general.
Mm-hmm.
We have a continuing question about the UPI from Colin Turner. UPI is a perfect way to maintain the current system. Of course, UPI will have positive effects in a monetary economy. Why wouldn't it? The question ought to be how it solves consumerism, ecocide, and an endless growth economy.
I felt like that we kind of touched upon some of that stuff earlier when asked the question. I still, like I said, I think my point still resides that there are both drawbacks and there are benefits, of course, to it. I feel like, I think it was Vala that mentioned just like when they did the UBI. It's in Finland, I believe. I mean, yes, I'm very sure that's where it's going on, and just looking into the very that people were not like using it to booze out or whatever, or go on spending sprees or whatever, but a lot of people are actually taking advantage of sustaining themselves, and that doesn't always mean consumerism, I think, in the end, if that answers part of the concern or the question.
The universal basic income experiments that have been done before have never paid out enough money so that people actually can go on spending sprees. It's actually provides the basic needs, or helps provide the basic needs to give people some dignity. I think that is the main aim.
Exactly, and I feel like that's exactly where it's going for, because you're not getting a big sum of money or whatnot. You're getting yourself to basically take the stress or the weight off your shoulders off, so you can basically function again if you're in a very difficult situation, of course, financially. So it's a reliever in a sense. I can't say exactly, just as Vala just pointed, that it's not enough to really make you go and just be a wild consumer again, although I'm not denying that also people perhaps would try and take advantage of it, but I think they won't be able to sustain it.
If I may add to the consumer part of it, because we haven't really discussed it much, is the fact that I've been living in the last maybe a year below poverty, and been really enjoying not buying anything except food and maybe a light bulb or something. And I've never been much of like just buying stuff for the sake of buying stuff. But honestly, it doesn't really matter how much money you make. You always find ways to spend it. You know what I mean? You never have enough. And so I think the biggest shift we could do to protect the environment is that each and every one pledges to stop being a fucking stupid tourist in like a low-cost fast food tourist industry. And secondly, stop buying batteries that you cannot recharge. Demand that shops actually will sell you rechargeable batteries. There is like no supermarket in Iceland where I can buy rechargeable batteries. But at the counter, I can go and buy batteries that are going to end up in a landfill, most likely. Not everyone recycles. So demand that you can buy military-grade printers, military-grade cars, refrigerators, phones that are not going to break down after 5 years. And stop, by all means, taking responsibility for the petroleum industry, for plastics, for example. The responsibility is not on us as individuals. It's on these corporations that have been abusing this planet for so long, and we buying their crap. You can't even recycle most of this plastic. It's just going to be burnt in Sweden or in a landfill somewhere. So, don't buy their bullshit. Tell Shell to, go F themselves.
May I add a point, because I think that Birgitta was spot on with regard to what people can do as consumers. And that is one of our economic phases. We have several phases. We are consumers, we are producers, we are investors. If you have any disposable capital that you can put into a bank or into a pension fund or whatever. And so there are ways in all these economic functions that we each individually perform that can help us steer the ship in the right direction. But then we are not just economic agents, we are political agents. So we can vote for certain parties. We can put pressure on our MPs and representatives. We can participate in the political life of our community and enroll in a political party. There are trade unions, there are NGOs, so there are many things that we can do, and we have to do them all. And so do more and more people whom we can convince through our social experiments or our inspiring talks and fora. But it is also very important, I think, to add the responsibility of the supply side, not just the demand side, because here we've been focusing on demand, starting with the UBI and so on. There must be strict rules and regulations that are forcibly applied, stopping industries and also financial corporations from facilitating life-destructive practices, such as, for example, the arms industry. If a country made it impossible or very difficult for its banks to invest money into the military sector, that would help. This is something, for example, that has been discussed repeatedly by, well, the heads of the Catholic Church since Benedict XV during the First World War. So it's old ideas that, you know, need a refresh and need pushed forward with every generation. I was thinking while we were all discussing how many of the things we have said about well-being not being measurable in terms of GDP, advertising making us stupid and making us buy a lot of crap, as Birgitta rightly calls it, and the war machine as guiding political decision-making in the United States of America. All these things can be found in the work of John Kenneth Galbraith, one of the greatest economists of the 20th century. In fact, it ended in 2004. But he is not taught in our universities. Like Schumacher is not taught of small is beautiful, and Vala is a member of the Schumacher Institute. Because instead at university we have neoliberal textbooks and only neoliberal conceptions that are being peddled to students. So yeah, we have brought together so many levels, and with each level we have also envisioned ways, tools, instruments that can be used in order to improve things, which makes me very hopeful.
Yeah, but the thing is that we have all the solutions.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to get together and demand that they are implemented and take part in showing that we are actually are role models in changing our lives. Yeah, we don't need more technology. We don't need to go to Mars, you know, although a lot of technology is developed in, you know, going to other planets, but we actually just need to gather together all the knowledge we have and let's just do it, you know.
So we have one final question. It's from Atom Antium. How do you maintain your optimism considering the large task of social transformation? And this is for everyone.
This is a question my students often ask me. And basically, when I woke up to the unsustainability of the world, which is now about 20 years ago, I decided that I needed to shift everything I was doing to try to find some solutions. And basically I was, you know, I'm actually a geologist and was working on environmental science, and environmental scientists work on problems. But sustainability scientists that I sort of turned myself into solutions. So we just need to find the solutions, and there is not one solution for all. and implement them where we are. And I feel I need to do this in order to be able to have a conversation with my grandchildren, because I don't want them to say, Amma, which is grandmother in Icelandic, why didn't you do anything? You are a sustainability scientist. And I do at least want to say, I really tried. Because otherwise, I would just do what the average Icelanders does when they don't want to confront the problems. You just go out and get drunk. I would be drunk all the time. So
I can drop 2 pennies here, because the reason why I keep being optimistic is that I'm a student of history. And I look back, I see horrible cruelties that have been slowly reduced or eliminated. We have made enormous progress as a species in a relatively short time. And that says something about our collective abilities for self-correction. It is always an uphill struggle. But I mean, think, for example, of the abolition of slavery and the abolition of aristocratic privilege. They have been with us for countless centuries. They were taken by many as just a fact of life, like having air to breathe, or trees, well, with the exception of certain parts of Iceland and Greenland, of course. But, well, we managed to produce the ideas, the values, the institutions, and the momentum required to get past them. So we can do it. It won't happen from one day to the next. Perhaps we won't even notice when it happens.
If I can jump in and just say what gives me optimism to keep on going. It's like what I was speaking actually with Vala's friend, with the philosopher, the other evening, who was a really splendid person to speak with. And he was kind of challenging, I think, this notion on the optimism. And it also reminds me a little bit of even like what Birgitta shared in her speech. And just basically, it's if this is, and when I'm coming back to like how I feel and say is like, if this is what you really want, this is what you want to see for yourself, as much importantly also for other people, your environment, because you're nothing without the relationships. You're nothing without those relationships with other people. If you want all this, what do you have to lose, really? I mean, this is your life, it's our life. And if you have the intention to really make good well-being for people, and I think people take it very for granted, how far people's passions and wantings can actually bring them, especially. I'm a real strong acknowledger and believer in that. And just a lot of people have inspired me from the Zeitgeist Movement and also from other places, even a few political people, whatever their beliefs or whatever, they basically also have, they're also people and they share things that are motivating that I see a lot of truth in, more or less. But one thing I'll just close in by saying that it actually has to be for Icelanders, and that basically for a country of such a size, so small, yet when something happens in relationship to the environment or politicians misbehaving and corruption being exposed or whatever, the voice that the Icelanders make sends volume shockwaves across the whole entire globe, and standing in defiance or pointing out to stuff. And I remember when I was young, 17 or so, before I could even, I had a beard, and I saw Birgitta Jónsdóttir with so many people challenging the corruption in the government. Back then I was too intimidated to even try and pronounce her name. It's changed now. I never even expected that 13 years later I would be living here in Iceland and know her and a lot of other people that were in this personally. and that's they've been a huge inspiration for me all of these years since I started thinking a little bit outside the box and re-questioning community and all this stuff. So that's my personal answer again, aside from the Zeitgeist Movement, is that a lot of people here in Iceland are what keep me here going. So I'm happy to be here and that they could come and speak their minds and voices to share with the Zeitgeist Movement and for the whole world, basically.
Einar, why don't you say something?
I can say something. Well, I'm not optimistic at all, so that's clear. But I feel it as my duty to keep on trying with all those good people that I met during the last few decades working on this. And I owe it to my children and their children and other people around me to do my best, because I see a problem and I know about solutions, and yeah, I have to keep working on it. It's just my duty. I could just check out and give up, but I couldn't actually live with it. So this is my duty. This is my destiny to do this. But I don't agree completely with Giorgio that we got rid of aristocracy and slavery. I just think we changed the methods of becoming an aristocrat and a slave. I think we are more or less all slaves of the monetary system. But I think that we can find that solution, and as Vala said, we have to find the solution, otherwise we're just doomed. So, but don't let me reduce your optimism. So I think we will manage somehow, sometime. So Birgitta.
Well, you know, me and Einar, we have known each other for a very long time. And, you know, Einar was one of the people that inspired me. And so, you know, I think the machine that drives my occasional unbearable lightness of being is to be inspired by other people. And my greatest gift is when I hear that other people have been inspired by me. And so for me, that's enough energy to just go on and to meet like-minded people, and knowing that we are just doing our best. You know, as long as we have good intentions, we're not trampling on other people's rights, except we might have to do that when it comes to the 0.001% that owns everything. Like, you know, the new aristocracy is Bezos and those guys. So yeah, just never give up. Never, ever give up. It's my only advice, you know. But we're not always going to be like, woohoo, I'm so optimistic. I'm actually a really pessimistic, to be honest, but I'm worse than Einar. I just hide it better. So, yeah. Thanks, everyone. It was great. Very inspirational. You're all great.
Yes, I'm very happy that I took part in this discussion. Thank you.
All right. Adios. Bless.
No,
Shall we
it's been
see
a
you?
pleasure.
Wait, Svandís, I guess, yeah, you close the meeting then?
Yes, let's do that. So we would like to express a huge thanks to all of our speakers and to everyone watching the live stream for participating in the 12th Global Seed Day. Despite the challenges through a pandemic, we did it. We hope that everyone can take something back from this conference to heart with an expanded sense of understanding and possibility for the world. And we hope we have had a new renewed energy of collaborations to shift tides for positive change. Our true power lies in our relationships to each other and our ability to work towards common ends through a common desire for change. The sooner we realize this, the sooner we can overcome the world problems we face, to obsolete the old and advance the new. We are not victims of a collapsing world, we are participants, we are architects. While the conference portion of our event has concluded, we now move to our live-themed after-party. Volume will be hosting this year's Global Seed Days after-party in their studio in Reykjavik. There will be 3 DJ sets with each DJ playing 1 hour each. Our DJs this year will be Karla Rosemary, playing minimal house and deep house, Eyvindur Eggertsson, playing deep house and tech house, and the rock grandmother Andrea Jónsdóttir, playing Icelandic and international rock and alternative. There will also be interviews with our artists after each of their performances. This after-party live stream will be moved over to TCM's Iceland's Facebook page. For a direct link, please visit www.zeitgeistmovement.is. We hope you all enjoy the show. We also have a few important announcements to make concerning TCM before continuing out to the after-party. As of today, we would like to initiate a new milestone for the movement, which has become known among many as TCM 2.0. For over 10 years, TCM's role has been to bring awareness of possibilities and introduce a train of thought for realizing progress and sustainability in the world. Over that time, we helped spread some key understandings, the flaws and contradictions of the current system, the 1% injustice, the urgencies of ecological crisis, the trends and implications of technology unemployment, political mechanism like a universal basic income, structural systematic awareness, and fostering exploration beyond the labor for income system. Humanity's collective consciousness is emergent. Our circumstances constantly change. As a movement, we must also emerge and adapt, and be willing to meet reality and existing systems where they are at. Our rate of social progress is bound to the level of understanding of the great majority. And while awareness building is still a core focus at TCM, we have broadened our context and approaches to include all necessary and emergent avenues for this transition. These approaches include intentional communities, co-ops, use shared libraries, political legal mechanisms, public banking, and collaborative design platforms, culture and music activities, to name a few. Where before our large-scale system change goals may have lacked practical application into the everyday here and now, and where community projects may have failed in their ability to address more mechanisms of society, there can be much more of a bridge between the two. This will allow participants and ideas to flourish more fluidly and organically, affecting progress where we can, while always maintaining and working towards the bigger picture implications for a radical paradigm shift of the unsustainable systems in place. In future communication, we'll be exploring these approaches in detail, and we'll also cover some of the wisdom and lessons learned in the experience of the movement, how our chapter organizational structure has evolved and became much more fluid and decentralized, as well as expand on some of the core concepts of the train of thought. Also, TCM has updated itself with a new code of conduct for involvement to ensure a more productive and friendly environment for activism. The guidelines inform everyone about the standard of behavior expected within the community, and will facilitate newcomers to feel more welcomed in to get involved. The code of conduct can be found at www.thezeitgeistmovement.com. There is also a new website that has been designed to be an interactive resource and information hub for activists. This includes receiving and distributing information about current activity and projects happening, including graphics, templates, and documents as tools for building our content and furthering these ideas. The website can also be used to give status and progress reports for your region's activity and also request assistance if needed. The website URL is simply tcm.community. For anyone that would like to gather and talk about this new TCM 2.0 states and what you think that should mean, as well as discussing your thoughts on this year's Global Zeitgeist-Day event, you're welcome to join TCM's Discord server at 11 UTC, Iceland time tomorrow on Sunday, for an open meeting. Directions for accessing the Discord server, as well as finding links to our official social media platforms, can be found at our main website, www.thezeitgeistmovement.com. And so, to conclude, we wish you and everyone else in the world to stay healthy for the rest of 2020. And we will see you all again next year in 2021 in Mongolia for our 13th annual Zeitgeist-Day Global Main Event. Sjáumst!
Sjáumst! Takk fyrir, thank you!
Bye.